The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, continuing our coverage of the 2021 NFL Draft. You missed the running back player profile show. Shame on you. Go to Mayo Media Network right now. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and check that out as we go through running back by running back with former running back, collegiate level running back, Emory Hunt. So you can just go and check out that show right now. Today, breaking down all the wide receivers from the 2021 NFL Draft. Maybe we'll rank them, maybe we'll profile them, talk about them, because I need to learn as much as possible about the NFL Draft, and the best way to do so is to bring in experts on the matter like Jake Ciely from theathletic.com, friend of the show. You've been, MIA recently. You've been doing baseball.
Yeah.
I don't really care for baseball, but it's around this time of year when you start getting folded back into the mix every week.
Yeah, it's nice. It's been too long for us. I was wondering who you had on to talk running backs, and then you said Emory. I was like, well, can't get any much better than that, so I have no problem with that one. You could say former high school safety for 1 year, Jake Ciely. You could say that.
Well, there you go. And member of the high school golf team and backup safety on his high school football team. There you go.
Baseball, too. Starter in baseball.
You are the most qualified person, apparently, to talk about wide receivers in college going to the NFL with at this point. So just tell me about these guys. Like, in terms of if there's like a tier of the top wide receivers this year, you see different people throw out, there's two guys on a tier. There's one guy's on a tier. There's five guys on this tier. Who's actually the tier one at receiver as draft prospects?
In my opinion, there's three, and I've been doing that for the past 3 years now, where I did tiers. Before, I used to rank just like everybody out there did, just 1 through however far I got. And it actually goes back to the draft with Michael Thomas. And I think you and I even talked way back at that time. This is before I even knew Emory. And I said after the draft that Michael Thomas ended up with the perfect situation. Like, you could not find a better skill set to player to team position opportunity for what Michael Thomas was. And that's when I said, you know what? There's too much change after the draft. I'm going to do tiers from now on. So for me this year, it is 3. It's the 2 Alabama kids and Jamar Chase. So it's Chase, Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Those are my big 3. I know some people want to include Terrace Marshall, but we can talk about him too. But I think those 3 have the leg up. And honestly, Chase of the 3 is the most complete and most likely to be an NFL number 1. The other 2 with Waddle and Smith, they have a little bit of concerns, but they're talented enough that they could be in the right spot to be a tier 1 too. But that's what I'm talking about, landing spot. You could see somebody put Devontae Smith with his size and put him in a bad position where he's buried and now he's the 3rd wide receiver and all he's doing is running go routes for his team.
Who do we expect to be the team to take a receiver first? Do we think it's Miami?
There's a lot of people who think it's Miami. There's a lot that think Cincinnati could go right back into it and continue to build up Joe Burrow's weapons because they brought in Rife for the tackle situation, and they don't need a tackle right now. They need offensive line help, but they actually need interior offensive line help for this year. Rife isn't the long-term solution, so that's why some people are speculating that they could go Pitts, they could go wide receivers, because maybe they don't want to take the tackle right now. Maybe they do it in the second round. But it could be Cincinnati, it could be Miami. I think Miami is the best bet. Cincinnati would be a little bit more of a surprise, but I'd be shocked if one of these wide receivers isn't off the board by Philly, who a lot of people are rumoring that Philly might take a wide receiver as well. But I think one of them comes off the board before we get to Philly.
Yeah, and it could be a situation where Atlanta takes Pitts and then Cincinnati takes a wide receiver and then Miami's sitting there being like, oh, boy, maybe we need to trade this pick. Who knows?
Yes.
You should tune into the mock draft on Mayo Media Network coming out very, very soon if you want to see who we project those teams to end up taking if there's going to be a trade. Because we make trades in our mock draft just to fuck everything up and then just how we like to roll with it going through. So who do you think is the best fit for Miami? Is it Chase?
I'd say Chase, mostly because Waddle, I keep saying he's almost a clone of Tyreek Hill, and they just signed Will Fuller. So you want that complete alpha number 1 wide receiver, push Devontae Parker off to the side where Parker doesn't need to be that guy anymore. And he really had a year or two where he kind of showed some glimpses of it, but I think he's one of those situations where, similar to Corey Davis, he's better as a 1B instead of being the guy. So I could see Waddle, but I think Chase makes the most sense. The biggest thing that you're going to have too with Chase is you also have the year off. So there's going to be, you can nitpick with that and say, well, what if somebody doesn't trust that he's what we saw before? And then of course you go back to the injury with Waddle and what he was playing through. So I mean, you can nitpick all three of these, but I say Smith makes the least sense, Chase makes the most, and Waddle kind of fits in the middle.
So for the Dolphins, I mean, Smith would be, if Waddle or if Chase isn't available, Smith would probably be the better fit for Miami than over Waddle, wouldn't he?
I actually think Waddle would be the better fit because you could keep Fuller outside and use Waddle like Tyreek Hill, like he's used with the Chiefs. I think Smith would be a little bit redundant of Will Fuller. And despite the size, I think there's a redundant skill set there.
Yeah, unless you just wanted to turn your Tua offense into the vertical offense, which probably
isn't going
to be the best.
Why it doesn't. Right, and that doesn't make a lot of sense because most of last year's struggles with Tua and the offense in general, and why Preston Williams wasn't a great fit, is because they were moving to this pseudo West Coasty style offense. So if you all of a sudden went the other direction with it, everything you were just building with Tua just goes out the window. So I think actually Waddle would make more sense for that because then you can run some of those seams over the middle.
How deep is this wide receiver class compared to last year, which was, and now looking at it after 1 year, it seems like historically good in terms of depth?
I think people want to put it on the same level because there's a lot of names that people want to throw out there. I would say it's a little bit of a step behind. I think it's a very deep class, but I think there's more questions quicker than there were last year. Like last year, that top tier was, wow, everybody in the top tier should hit. And the second tier, there's like a lot of people, including myself. Justin Jefferson was in my second tier. I thought it was going to take him a year to turn into anything of where we're talking about as in top 15, top 20 wide receiver. So I definitely didn't expect him to succeed that quickly. And then you have people like Jalen Reagor who struggled because of the offense, because of the playing time, because he was the number one at times. So I think last year's draft is slightly a step ahead, but this one isn't far from it.
Okay. Yeah, I remember all the conversation about Jefferson was just like, well, if they put him on the outside, what's he going to do? Like, turns out he's pretty good.
It is. It turns out, that, and that's the thing is that Jefferson situation was, he didn't tear up the outside and wasn't unstoppable from a corner perspective. It's just, this is why landing spot matters so much. He was put in a position where he is the number two from day one. Like, even with a little bit of a slow start, he's the number two. He was in an offense that needed a number two. You look at the receivers that were there, nobody was going to hold him off. Like, that was his job to take. So you could go down this list and you could say, well, Cincinnati's a nice spot, but compared to Philly, might be a worst fantasy situation as a rookie because you're behind T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Where you step into Philly, you're probably starting alongside Jalen Reagor as the top two receiver.
Even if you go to Cincinnati with Higgins and Boyd right now, there's an outside spot available for someone to see immediate playing time.
There is, and there's, they ran plenty of three wide themselves, but it's not as, that's what I'm saying. It's not as advantageous as being the number two on basically not too dissimilar of an offense. Maybe Philly doesn't have the firepower, but I'm a Hurts fan. I think Hurts is going to take a huge step forward, like a lot of people do. I'm not the only person. But you're telling me the number two, I would take the number two. Put it this way. I like Chase better than the other two as the complete wide receiver, but you put Chase on the Bengals and Waddle on the Eagles, and I'll take Waddle in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about from a real life perspective where these guys are going to end up going. So the comp that we keep hearing with Waddle is Tyreek Hill. That seems unfair since Tyreek Hill is one of the best wide receivers of the past 10 years. Right. So what's a different comp for him, like a realistic comp?
To be honest, I think that's a realistic comp. But I get what you're saying. Like, do you want like a floor comp? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Because you can say player comp. That doesn't mean that player is that other player, but just it's
right.
Tyreek Hill. He reminds me of Tyreek Hill. He's Tyreek Hill. If that was the case, you should go fucking like number one overall.
Well, I actually have a bet where he's the first wide receiver off the board for that reason. So I think that's what you're looking at here is that's why you have a lot of people that are fascinated with him. I'm kind of thinking somebody else that, like that's where I'm leaning kind of like the floor is somebody with like a similar, I think that he's got some, kind of Cooper Kuppness to him where, that's the same range of the field. That's the same opportunities you have. You want him playing out of the slot for a good portion of his snaps, but doesn't need to be all of it like Tyreek Hill. I think if you're looking for, okay, he's not Tyreek Hill, I think Cooper Kupp might be the next step down.
So, all right. So we've done the tier 1. We have 3 receivers there. How many receivers do you think that you would have in tier 2?
I have 5 in tier 2.
Okay. Who are they?
They are Kadarius Toney, Terrence Marshall, Rashad Bateman, Rondell Moore, and Elijah Moore. The Moores. Not the Mopes. Not the Moops.
Not the Moops. So you have 2 Moores in your tier 2. So what order do you think that you would put them in from like a skill set perspective? Because obviously fantasy-wise, it is all about destination, how they're going to fit into that offense. But just objectively, how do you think you would put them in order?
So I didn't put him 1. I just kind of went through the list. But Terrace Marshall from LSU, skill set wise, is the best out of all of them. I mean, you're looking down here, you're looking at like with Moore and Toney. I mean, you're talking about guys that might get pigeonholed as slot options and might get stuck as slot options for a year or 2 before they're allowed to step into more. The thing I said with Marshall, and for comparison's sake, this is a comp of skill set, not a comp of like overall player, because Terrace Marshall is a bigger, better wide receiver than Marquise Lee was. The skill set situation that I brought up was when Marquise Lee came out of college, he was that much better than everybody he faced, so he was kind of lazy. He was lazy in his routes. He was lazy in his body positioning. He let corners get on top of him, and when he got to the NFL, he struggled, and that's why it took Marquise Lee a few years to get going. You hope that Marshall having that same issue. You see a lot of times where Marshall has the corner right on top of him, and he makes those catches because he's that much better. But until he cleans up his routes, he could struggle immediately. Hopefully it doesn't take him as long as it took Marquise Lee. But if you're just talking about pure talent in this range, I say Marshall, if you could just go, everybody's on the same team after the draft, I say Marshall is the upside here, the most upside here.
So which Moore would you go with?
I'm Rondell Moore over Elijah Moore. I've gotten pulled into thinking a little bit higher of Elijah Moore than I initially did, but I'm still a Rondell Moore guy. I think he's going to be in a situation where, you could, even if he's a slot option, I think you could see Robert Woods-like value for him, where he's even getting touches out of the backfield. They're just finding the way to get the ball in his hands.
Well, is that the same sort of thing with Toney as well, where you might see him kind of pop up all over the field?
Yeah, so I think it was Mina Kimes. I'm pretty sure it was her who tweeted this out, and it was one of those Mario creative levels where he's jumping all around. Somebody put like 1 million of those fireball circles all over the place, and he's like, Kadarius Toney. And I was like, that's pretty accurate. He's just all over the field. I said that, I think I could see Cole Beasley like for him, where, Cole Beasley is primarily the slot almost all the time. He's one of the highest in the league 80% of the time. But he's still a top 30, 35 wide receiver in fantasy just because he's hard to get control of defensively. He's finding space. He's finding ways to get open. And then after the catch, he's pretty damn good too. So I think Toney and even Moore is in that conversation. Bateman too. They're all 3 of those guys have some similarities, have some overlaps. The one concern with Rashad Bateman is he gets jammed pretty quickly if you have press coverage on him.
I was gonna say you seem to be a lot lower on him than Twitter seems to be, where everyone's just falling in love with Bateman. With Bateman, I mean, I've seen just maybe it's people with the hottest of hot takes, but like he's actually the best receiver in this draft.
See, and he was extremely highly thought of before the year. Cooled off a little bit. I'll go right to my breakdown. I'll pull it up. I'll tell you the negatives. I love him off the line of scrimmage. I actually said he runs routes like a NASCAR driver. He's just getting past people and weaving along. But I mentioned the jammed, and then when I said his speed style, the issue with this, trying to explain for everybody, is you see a lot of breakdowns in wide receivers, and you see people say varies their speed, slows down, explodes out of their breaks and stuff like that. And all these are ways they're saying is that they're not running one speed the entire time, and they're also not telegraphing when they do slow down. Bateman is very easy to kind of see what route he's planning to do because he varies his speed, but he varies it because of the route. He's not varying it to throw off his wide receivers. So you see a lot of times where corners aren't fooled. And if you're not fooling people in the Big Ten, you're not fooling people in the NFL. So I like him. It's just that in combination with handsy, press coverage, tough corners, kind of jam him up a little bit. That's my only concern is once he's free, forget about it. But my concern is getting free immediately.
Well, I mean, maybe this is a bad comp then, trying to think about it, but like when you see him on the field and just like the kind of routes that he runs, like the depth of the routes that he runs and what he can do in actual, feels like he has very strong hands, and he seems like someone who's just going to get a lot of volume. He's going to be a highly targeted receiver. He's going to be like a Keenan Allen type, where just we can throw the ball in his direction. He's not running sprints down the field. He'll be open 7 yards down the field, and that is going to be good enough if we want to continue to try to move the chains. He strikes me as one of those guys. Maybe I'm dead off on that.
No, I actually like that. And I said that in my last sentence on him. Becoming an NFL number one option isn't out of the question. I think that's a really good explanation and comparison for people sitting at home trying to think of like what are we talking about here. I think Keenan Allen's style in the NFL, I think that's a good comparison. But you can see where on the wrong team and the wrong situation where he wouldn't be as successful. So maybe Bateman is somebody that like Jalen Reagor doesn't pop until year 2, or maybe he's not even the one that takes off immediately. And we're talking about him in weeks 9, 10, 11. There is upside here. There's also, a lot of them. I mean, how many wide receivers do we talk about in general, rookie wide receivers that are actually top 25 right out of the gate? It doesn't usually happen. Like the Odell Beckham year with Mike Evans and Sammy Watkins, that's not the norm. No,
but last year was kind of like that in a way.
It was Jefferson. Who else do we have? I'm trying to think. There's 3 or 4.
Well, I mean,
top 35, right?
Judy got banged up and just didn't go to a decent situation, but he was very playable. Ruggs didn't really do much. Who was the other top one who ended up going? No, I can't remember.
Well, no, it wasn't a top one though. But Chase Claypool was up there, but his was for touchdown, and then T. Higgins. Oh, Brandon Ayuk was the 5th one I was trying to think. But Brandon Ayuk was there, but that also had to do with a Deebo Samuel injury, so that helped him.
Yeah. So I guess fantasy-wise, if we're thinking about it that way, then you're going to see probably maybe 2 to 3 options pop up.
I was about to say, put the over-under at 2.5.
But these guys do become viable somewhere down the line, whether it's a spot start, bench guy, DraftKings, that kind of thing, where if they get thrust into the right... That's why I say like Judy. Like Judy was kind of unplayable most of the year, but he did have a few of those weeks where like, oh, this is a good situation. Locke is back. He's finally, he's back being healthy. Everyone's kind of healthy on this team except for Cortland Sutton at this time. Now it's Judy time in a nice matchup, and he destroyed the Falcons, and I won a bunch of money that week. That was fantastic. But other than that, it was kind of dicey for him. Even someone like Mims, where Mims gets 13 targets a game and catches 4 of them.
Well, I was going to say, as much as we want to say, and no, this is probably going to be the worst team in the league in the Detroit Lions next year. Their top 2 wide receivers right now are Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams. You put Bateman there, and it's kind of similar to the Jefferson situation. You can walk into 120, 130 targets as a rookie. And as much as we want to knock Jared Goff, still had Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods inside the top 20 for fantasy purposes. So, you put Bateman, Marshall, Moore, Rondell Moore, probably not Elijah Moore, but probably Rondell Moore, maybe even Tony. I don't like anybody in this tier really lands on this team. And you're just talking about the volume being able to offset a lot of the concern that you might have for these guys.
Well, on paper, wouldn't Waddle be the primo guy for the Lions if he could make it there?
Yeah, but I don't know that. I was kind of thinking that the Lions don't take a wide receiver in round 1 for this point that I was making.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. I don't know what they're going to do. If they were smart, they'd just draft O and D linemen, wouldn't they?
You would think so, but yeah, who knows? So you said if they're smart. I mean, it's new regime, so maybe the new regime's smart.
Yeah, if it was like 15 years ago, it would just be receiver, 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 receiver. We'll eventually hit one. And they did it, actually.
Remember Charles Rogers?
I totally forgot. I was thinking about fake Mike Williams, the big Mike Williams from USC.
The fake Mike Williams, yeah. There was a lot of them. They went, 3 years in a row?
I think so. Megatron worked out.
That was the one. That was definitely the one.
If Pitts was listed as a wide receiver, where would he rank out in this class? Would he be one?
Yeah, I think I put him in tier 1. I jokingly said that at the end of the college football season. I said he's a wide receiver masquerading as a tight end. That's really what he is. He's that big of a beast. He's that big of a threat. I would consider him as tight end 1 as a rookie. Yes, as a rookie. Not even knowing where he lands. The only thing that could really kill him is if the Giants, if he fell there and now he's behind 3 wide receivers. Well, not talent-wise, but you have 3 wide receivers. You have Evan Ingram. You have Saquon Barkley. That's the only situation I could see that hurts him. Or, maybe the Lions surprise us and go Hawkinson and Pitts at the gate. But, yeah, I put him at tier 0. This is the first year ever I've done tier 0. I said Trevor Lawrence and Kyle Pitts are both tier 0s. They are that much better than everybody else. They deserve their own tier. They are special, generational, for the cliche, generational talents, but this is when a generational talent means generational talent.
I remember what's the expectation for Pitts when it comes to blocking? Is he like an Evan Ingram, Noah Fant type where they're just not going to ask him? Because I feel like that hurts someone like TJ Hawkinson. And it doesn't with Kittle because he's just used so much, but he's such a good blocker anyway. Gronk, in terms of volume, was always kind of like this too, where he was never going to see exceptional volume because his blocking was so good they asked him to stay back and block sometimes. And that happens to Hawkinson. That doesn't seem like it's going to be too much of a concern for Pitts.
No, well, the thing is, Pitts is actually a good blocker, so that helps. He's not.
It'll help, but it'll help keep him on the field. But sometimes
right.
he won't be asked to run routes. I'm guessing sometimes because he'll be asked to stand back and block.
Yeah, but I don't think it's gonna. I don't think you're drafting Kyle Pitts with the let's make sure we're using him in the passing game. In the passing game as a blocker. Your point about staying on the field, I think, is more important. Is that he's not a terrible blocker, so he's not going to have to come off the field. That's what's better and bigger about his upside.
So we'll see his snap shares up around like 90-95% then.
No, I wish. I don't know if it'll be that. I think maybe year two.
Maybe a year or two. So tell me about like the tier 3 and the rest of the receivers. Who are you excited about from down here?
So there's two of my tier 3 that I'm mostly excited about. So is Diami Brown from UNC. The kid averaged over 20 yards a catch.
I got to ask you, how I didn't pay attention to college football. How good was UNC? Because apparently they have all of these like super high skilled position players.
And they have a really great quarterback for their future too. They were better than you would think UNC to be for a football program. Like the UNC is not usually where you're thinking, oh my God, let's go check them out. You know, I kind of think of it like Penn State when, you had Allen Robinson coming out and Chris Godwin. It's just UNC just happened to hit at the right time. They weren't amazing. They just had a couple really good players, but the problem is where they did it, they had a lot of deficiencies too. So it kind of evened itself out.
Okay. So Brown is one that you're excited about. Who was the other guy?
My guy that I'm trying to, I know you're going to hate it because it's my nickname and you hate all my nicknames, but I'm calling Josh Imatorbhebhe the Mummy because it makes me think of Emotep every single time I see his name. And nobody goes by the Mummy, but I love this kid from Illinois. Similar, I compare him a little bit to Marshall in the fact that he's got everything you want skill set wise, body wise. You want like an NFL wide receiver to be. He was out battling everybody at Illinois when people knew that he was the only talent on the field and getting throws from a mediocre quarterback and from a mediocre offense. And he's the guy, I'm not going to say for everybody out there, I'm not saying he's Calvin Johnson, but you brought up Calvin Johnson before, where Calvin Johnson was like, okay, all you have to do for the Lions is stop Calvin Johnson, and people couldn't do it. That was kind of the same thing with Imatorbhebhe. He still has development issues. He still needs to clean up his routes quite a bit. That's understandable coming from Illinois. And any wide receiver, really. There's very few wide receivers that step right out of college and are like, oh my God, there are 90 out of 100 at route running. But he's somebody that I'm super excited to see where he lands. He he probably will be somebody we're talking about more for 2022 than 2021 though. But yeah, and to go back to Brown, he's just a big play, somewhat like a Will Fuller type of upside with Brown.
I like Emotep. I actually think that's a very good nickname.
Yes.
I'm just calling him the Mummy. Maybe he runs his routes like this.
I'm done.
Do you remember the scene in the original Mummy when John Hannah had to pretend like he was under the gaze and just started walking around like this? I love the original Mummy.
That.
I mean, it's not the original Mummy, but the Brendan Fraser first Mummy. Good movie. Yeah, great flick.
It's for all intents and purposes, that is the original Mummy for what we're thinking about.
Yeah, because we're not like 97 years old. Who was the Mummy? Right. It wasn't Frank Langella. He was Dracula back in the day. And it wasn't Bela Lugosi. Now I can't even remember.
Have you seen The Mummy recently and seen how bad the CGI was with those beetles?
Oh yeah, it's not good. It's weirdly on all the time, so I'll pick it up at some point and just be like, oh yeah, The Mummy, let's go. I miss Brendan Fraser.
Do you ever see the Scorpion King when that comes on with The Rock?
That is very rarely on. I did see that in theaters, though, as I was such a big fan of The Rock and his burgeoning movie career at the time. Who could have thought? I think they made like a direct to VOD sequel to that without The Rock.
No, there was a second. I know there was a third. There might have even been a fourth. I think I was talking with somebody the other day and was telling me Scorpion King had the fourth. Scorpion King. Yeah, Scorpion King 4, The Quest for Power.
I like it. The Rock's not in any of these, right?
No.
Okay. Equinemius St. Brown's brother? Better or worse?
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
Better, because Equanimeous St. Brown, you remember this. Everybody always wanted me to call a Notre Dame homer, and I was the quickest to trash everybody coming out of Notre Dame. He's better, but similar, I would say, concerns coming. Fewer concerns, but similar concerns in the fact that he's not ready to be a rookie impact option. All these guys, like, I have Nico Collins in this range. I have Amari Rogers from Clemson in this range. Austin Watkins is a sleeper that a lot of people like from UAB. But St. Brown is in this same range of wide receivers where, right situation, you could probably see something in 2022. You're thinking of these 2 to 3 year developmental guys. The good thing for St. Brown is that's one who he's at the top of the class for route running, but doesn't have great speed, doesn't really get deep on defenses. And, somebody else who could use to build up a little bit of strength. So he's got, the good thing with him is the strength issue is addressable. The speed thing's probably never going to come.
Yeah. 4.6 40 time. Not great for a receiver.
No, but everybody will always go back to Jerry Rice that he ran a 4.6. So
yeah,
if you're used the right way, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, turns out if you're Jerry Rice, it doesn't really matter. If you're anyone who's not Jerry Rice, bit more of a problem maybe.
I'm not a big 40 guy in general because let's be honest, Pat, you know this, and everybody out there, you're watching football and you watch them play and you see them on TV. Nobody at home is sitting there going, yeah, that's a 4.4 route instead of a 4.6 route. I can tell. It's 0.2 seconds. You can't tell.
No, but I do think that it speaks to, I don't necessarily, if it's in the middle of like your average time, like plus or minus whatever points of a second, you can be exceptionally fast if you run like a 4.3 something. Or if you're like,
right.
I'm looking at this guy right now, Sage Surratt from Wake Forest. He ran a 4.7. Like that seems slow. Not like actual person slow. That feels like NFL slow. Like there are linemen that run 4.7s.
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring up Sage Surratt because he was in this group too. And after seeing that, I do have some more concern than I did. But the thing was that was already an issue that I wasn't expected to be addressed is because Surratt wins contested catches. That's who he is. I said, if you want to think of a comparison, again, I'm not putting him on Kenny Galladay's tier. But what do we know about Kenny Galladay at this point of his career? He's not going to separate. If you're throwing to Kenny Galladay, you have to understand probably 50% of the time he's going to be covered. The thing is he comes down with 90% of those balls. Surratt has that similarity, but Surratt doesn't also have the overall skill set and ability of Kenny Galladay. So somebody like Surratt, somebody with that 4.7, and if you ever put up a 4.8, good God, I'm with you on that. If you're at the extremes, but if you're in between a 4.4 to a 4.6, that doesn't really ever make me think twice.
Well, what if you're Anthony Schwartz? He uses the Schwartz apparently to gain his speed. Is there any more like fitting place for him to go than the Raiders with a 4.27 40 on his pro day?
The first two words, terrific speed. That's exactly what I said. The funny thing is with him is his short range game is limited despite this, because you see some of these guys who have great speed, but they struggle to quickly release. You know what? Not the Raiders, obviously. I know you're joking with that. I'm trying to think of someone that could, I could see a Deshaun Jackson type of value for him. So if you find the right team where he's that third option, but that third, there's another one. I think Deshaun Jackson's kind of like, to go back to what you're saying about Tyreek Hill. Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller feel like the best case, speedy, deep threat scenarios. So I'll bring up one that I always come back to is, remember Nate Washington?
Oh yeah,
like a
nasty Nate.
Yeah, kind of like a Nate Washington, where he's probably the wide receiver for a team and kind of looking for those big plays on the field, maybe 40-50% of the time.
Well, I don't want to give away too much. I'm looking at Jeff Radcliffe's draft guide right now. You can find that up on ftnfantasy.com, by the way. Code Mayo. Tell them that I sent you if you want to go check that. I'll dump it into the description of this video and podcast as well. But is Anthony Schwartz's player comp as a poor man's Mecole Hardman?
I won't even say a poor man. I think Hardman's a decent comp. There's another one right there for you. But we're seeing with Hardman that if you're not Tyreek Hill and you are limited in various ways, you're still going to have struggles at the NFL level and be kind of, I don't want to say he's gimmicky, but he's somewhere between gimmicky and somewhere between being a trustworthy Deshaun Jackson. I don't know I think Nate Washington. I'm going to go back to Nate Washington.
So it all depends
it's
like someone like Nate Washington can only ever really thrive because he was in a perfect system with a good quarterback.
Yeah, a good system, good quarterback, and could be the number 3 option, not kicked down far enough. Like, put Anthony Schwartz on the Giants now that they have Galladay. So you have Galladay, and they have a somewhat deep threat in Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard. It's like, okay, we might hear Schwartz's names 4 times throughout the year, that type. But if you put him on the Saints with Jameis Winston, and he could be the number 3 there, and maybe kick aside Traquan Smith, now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I could get 6, 7, maybe even 8 games out of him.
Is there any way that Daz Newsome can become a thing? Because that is a fantastic first name. 2 Z's.
There's a lot of people that are a little bit higher on Daz than I am. I will say that for my first sentence about him, it's funny. I was just looking at him because I was waiting for you to say, are there names that you think should be mentioned as sleepers? And so I was already kind of like looking. The first part I said about it, he's a Ginsu knife. He just cuts through defenses. And that's the one good thing about him is there's some receivers in this draft class like Newsome who just know where to go. And where I say that is I forget whose podcast I was doing, but I was trying to draw a comparison to anybody who's ever played Madden, and you have that passing play come up and you see the route for the receiver has like that 3 little, it almost kind of looks like half of Matt Harmon's reception perception thing. It's an option route. And I know a lot of people understand I know what an option route is. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. It's like some people don't. So I was trying to explain it visually for everybody. Those kind of situations for Newsome where it's kind of like pick his own adventure. He could do a lot of damage in offense like that because he finds ways to get open, unlike some of the other guys we've talked about.
So he would be, I mean, I'm trying to think of the offenses that use players like that. It's probably more than we think, but you always hear about it. I feel like that was always the Julian Edelman thing with Brady, that he had the option on his route. Hey, if you see like this coverage, then just boot it up the field and I'll know just to kind of just chuck it up to you. If not, run the route that we thought. So if he's in an offense that's it sounds like it's a bit more complicated, that's probably better for him.
Yeah, I can see, taking
like the
over
Rams?
as like the Rams. I was going to say the number 3 in Atlanta, but I don't think it would be immediately. But a situation
instead of Russell Gage, it would be Daz Newsome.
Yeah. Yeah, a situation like that where a lot of the times where that really works out well is when you have 2 top wide receivers. Like, I think you saw some of that with CeeDee Lamb last year with the Cowboys because, I'm not saying
that was the other receiver that we didn't bring up was CeeDee Lamb when we were talking about the rookie receivers.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb was another one. Mostly because he disappointed for what people thought he could be. Well, was he the 3rd best last year? I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of like that where, it doesn't, Gallup is obviously nowhere near the level yet, potentially, of Amari Cooper. I don't think he gets to Amari Cooper, and he's definitely nowhere near Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. But you have 2 quality options where that 3rd guy could step forward. And that's, I know we're talking rookies here, and I hate the Giants as much as anybody because I want Gettleman gone. But that's why I think Sterling Shepard could bounce back because now you can let Sterling Shepard just find openings, find ways to get open while Galladay and Slayton are busy on the outside. So some of these situations, if you fall into, Daz Newsome would be a good one. I'm trying to think.
Daz Newsome.
Tyler Vaughn's.
What about Daz Newsome on the Vikings or the Packers?
I could see the Vikings. My concern there is Packers. Yes. My concern with the Vikings is just they don't really use the 3rd option. It's
but maybe it's because their 3rd options like BC Johnson.
I mean, that's true. But you know what? I don't know that there's a huge gap from BC Johnson to Daz Newsome.
Oh, okay.
I would kind of that's why. I mean, the guys we're talking about right now, we're in my tier 5 already.
Yeah, we're into
tier 4 guys.
We're basically into day 2, day 3 wide receivers.
Oh, definitely day 3.
Okay, so just give me a few that maybe that you like from down here. Sleepers, underrated guys. You said you were already scanning, so hit me up with them.
Well, I was going to say we skipped past tier 4. I'm looking right now. I don't think we mentioned a single person in tier 4.
Well, you can bring those up.
We did.
This is your time to bring those guys up.
Yeah. Anthony Schwartz, we did. He's in tier 4 for me. I'll give you 2 out of this group. I'll say I'm a little bit higher on Tamari and Terry of FSU than most people. And that's what I was about to say. He's great positioning. Kind of, as you can tell what I'm about to say, he kind of like skates through defenses. Sometimes I try to vary my ways of saying, weaves in and out of traffic. You try to find like different ways to say it. For everybody out there, for positioning and stacking, which is, you're getting the position and you're you kind of push the defender back with stacking. Like you're putting him in position to where you are going to get to the ball before he can, or he has to react to it. Terry's really good at that. And then another one in this group, Seth Williams at Auburn. I actually have him close to the top. Yeah, 2nd in tier 4. Dwayne Eskridge is one that a lot of people like, but I think Seth Williams is getting overlooked at Auburn. His concern right now is separation, but similar to the Sage Surratt thing that you brought up, he could be a chain mover and red zone option right now with the potential to kind of grow and develop a little bit more.
I mean, it basically sounds like you're describing like Dorrell Beckham Green.
No. Green Beckham?
Green
Darrell
Beckham, yeah.
Beckham.
Yeah, he was so bad I forgot the order of his names.
I think I'm trying to think. There was somebody that I was saying that Darrell Green Beckham could be in this draft. I'm trying to think of who it was because that's what you're saying. It's just like, oh my God, all these skills. All he needs to do is, oh no, go back to his Terrace Marshall. That's the downside for Terrace Marshall is if he doesn't ever change his ways and he's like Marquise Lee, where he just tries to get back with, hey, I'm good. I'm that much better than everybody else. And he doesn't develop route running and he doesn't develop position. Like if you could put Tamarian Terry and Terrace Marshall into one receiver, like just take Terry's knowledge of how to stack corners, take his route running, take his ability and give it to Terrace Marshall, he would be in tier 1.
Okay. But he's not. That's why we have these questions about him.
Not.
Anyone else from down this? I asked Emery this question. I'll ask you. I asked it as it pertained to running backs with him. But for wide receivers, because of the way that the COVID affected the college football season, do you think that some teams, whether it is with an undrafted free agent signing or someone in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, from one of these smaller schools where there's like legit talent that just may not have had the opportunity to have been scouted properly?
Yeah, so that's a good one. I'll give you one more that we didn't get to that I know a lot of draft nicks people type out there will love to hear is Jalen Dart in North Texas. There you go. North Texas wide receiver. What I said about him is trying to catch a fly inside your house. It's similar to the Tony situation. He's just a scatterbug. Good luck. And some people might not have noticed that. And people overlook, like, North Texas. Again, how many people are scouting North Texas? I'm looking down this list. Cade Johnson's in tier 5 with some of these other guys. South Dakota State. You know, how many people are going to South Dakota State and watching South Dakota State games? So there will be some. I thought you were going to go a different direction with the whole COVID situation and say, are we going to see slow to get on the field opportunities for rookie wide receivers? And I could see that as well, especially if you're looking at some of the schools that didn't even have a full 10-game season, that only play like 6 games or 5 or 7 or whatever it might be. You might see some guys that are just slow to catch on because it was their last year of development in college, and they're already going to probably end up being day 3 picks anyway.
Well, I would actually spin that the other way, that you could say that a shortened season for some guys on these teams, the NFL teams probably look at it and be like, hey, we've seen what we've needed to see, and they only had 6 games of wear and tear from last year, so they might be a bit fresher and ready to go right away, but they don't have the experience of playing now 17 games throughout the course of an entire season. They might fade coming down the stretch.
Yes, for tier 1, tier 2, and maybe some tier 3 guys. So what I was saying for day 3, and that's why I said day 3 picks, the day 3 wide receivers that didn't get to play that much, I think it's going to be, I don't know if we saw enough of what we hope to see of, you know, let's go back to it. Let's talk about, you know, let's say Surratt had speed, but he still couldn't separate. You know, that'd be one where, like, okay, you know, he spent his 7 games and he couldn't get off coverage. We haven't seen it, so he falls, and it's like, all right, we're going to have to see it in practice before we even let him get on the field, that type of thing.
Interesting. I'm just trying to think about guys from last year's draft who could be good this year. That
Jalen Reagor. I keep going. I'm going to have so much Jalen Reagor. Everybody's just throwing him aside like he doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, but is that a talent thing, or is that because he's the only guy on the Eagles who's there?
It's both. I think they addressed the wide receiver position. He's one of the top 2 wide receivers, and he's a top 2 potential. He's not there yet, obviously. He had his own struggles, and he wasn't complete coming out of college. But all the excitement for Reagor that people had last year was for a reason. He's still going to be the number 1 or number 2 with Jalen Hurts in the second year. If anything, we were talking about it earlier in the show, you're talking about tier 3 wide receivers who could step into a potential volume situation. I'll go back to the Lions. You want to tell me that one of the Moores ends up on the Lions or Jalen Reagor with the Eagles? I'm going to take Jalen Reagor because it's his second year. And now he hopefully, I'm going back to the fact I think they addressed the wide receiver position in the first or second round. And that alone, not having him just be the only quality option half of the season is part of the reason too. I mean, look at it. Jalen Reagor was asked to be, you know, I'll give you another comparison. Is the Henry Ruggs situation. So, you know, I was high on Henry Ruggs. And I said this during the year last year that why I was jumping off the Henry Ruggs rookie bandwagon is because Henry Ruggs, he is, like the Jefferson concern, was somebody who wasn't ready to be an outside option. The good thing was that Bryan Edwards was winning and was the starting outside wide receiver, but then he got hurt. and the improvement of Nelson Aguilar going into the slot pushed Ruggs outside. So those two reasons, Ruggs started playing outside a lot, and he wasn't equipped for it. He's not ready for it. Similar to Rager, he wasn't equipped to be the number one attention guy for defenses at the wide receiver position.
Is Nico Collins the wide receiver who people are going to get enamored with because of the size and because of the speed, and it's just going to turn out he's no good?
Just the thing is, I'm looking immediately because I knew my sentence says this. First part, good speed and quickness combo given his size. There you go. Boom. Not a good route runner. Somebody else that, yeah, I could see. This is the Darrell Green Beckham thing you brought up before. A lot of these receivers have this, and they're, again, it's like saying quarterbacks need to learn to read progressions better and all that types. This is a common thing for wide receivers, is to need route running, cleanup, development, technician wise, or whatever spin you want to put on it. There's very few wide receivers that don't need to work on their routes, but he is somebody who needs more than the average. So
yeah,
that's my concern with him.
But his player profile, just like the athleticism, the size, the speed, that always enamors teams' front offices because, like, oh, we can teach him how to do that. Now, as you said, it rarely develops. But if you do hit on this type of player and you can harness, you can put the route running into this frame of receiver, all of a sudden you have like Mike Evans on your hands.
Well, and the good thing with Collins is Surratt has a lot of experience. Collins doesn't. You only have 38 receptions in his sophomore year, and then he opted out last year. So you're looking at somebody who you could say, all right, he hasn't had enough reps. He hasn't been out there enough with enough teaching to learn how to really get clean in his routes. I'd rather go for a Collins than a Surratt. I'd rather go for somebody who hasn't been out there. So I could see it. But, I would say put him on a team that wants to teach and has the patience and doesn't try to force the issue. Because we've seen this before. I'm not going to pull in DK Metcalf as in a similar style, but like DK Metcalf on the wrong team would have failed. If we know this, the Seahawks let him stay on one side of the field the majority of his rookie season and let him run a very limited route tree. If you want to start off Nico Collins that way and develop him, sure. But if you're forcing him out there from day one, he just lets – the thing is he's going to lead to – what would be a terrible situation is quarterbacks like – Daniel Jones, like Jameis Winston before. Well, we don't know that he's better, but Jameis Winston's anybody with inaccuracy and poor decision making. Nico Collins is a bad fit there because he lets the defenders get back into the play. He'll get separation and then kind of sit down too early and stop moving, and corners just come right back on top of him.
So he'd be good with in a 20-yard radius with someone like Drew Brees, essentially.
Yes, I would. If Drew Brees was still with the Saints, throw him on the Saints, please.
Does lack of, this is such a weird one, but you have to bench the 225. And there are some guys that can do it pretty well. And most of these guys are undersized versus very few of these guys weigh 225 pounds. But you see some of the bench presses be like 9. That's not great. Where you see someone like Rondell Moore, 24 putting up, he weighs 181 pounds. Like, that's a strong guy. Like, just with that sort of actual power. Does it worry you if guys can't even do 10 bench presses?
So I would say this is similar to the 40 is the extreme. The extreme worries me. The extreme under. The extreme high, I don't put too much into it because after being at the combine, and you can watch it on TV too, so anybody has the bench press, is you see some of these guys, they bounce off their chest. Anybody who lifts weights and has ever been to the gym, when you're getting that bounce off your chest. There's been guys when I've been watching it, and I'm afraid they're going to crack their rib. Like that's how much they're getting bounce off their chest. So the 24 would be like, all right, I need to see it. And, if I didn't, I'll go back and all right, is it a real 24? Or does he just really know how to do a good momentum job with the bench press? But yes, the under, the low, the 6, 7, 8, 9, that's slightly concerning, especially. So, this, I say this all the time to you. I'm a film over metrics, but I use both. I'm like 60-40, 60-40, 60 on the film side. If the metrics are way off, I'll go back and double check and say if I saw something wrong. If you say, I see somebody who struggles with press coverage. They lose hand fighting, and then they only bench 8. You've just doubled down and been like, oh, crap, this guy is going to struggle in the NFL to separate. If you have somebody that I'm like, oh, look, he's getting space all the time, and all of a sudden he benches at 8, I might go back and look for some of the times that he was getting bump and press coverage early in steps, and maybe I need to double look. So, yes, the very, very low end I will be concerned about sometimes.
Well, I would even think of someone like, what's his name? DeMonte Coxey, the guy from Memphis.
Yes.
That's his name. So he had two
Ronnie
huge,
Coxey, yes.
Yeah, he had 2 huge seasons at Memphis, and then last year was kind of a write-off for him. But like 4 bench presses. The guy weighs 200 pounds. He ran a 4.7740. His vertical was way under like everyone else at like 30.5. Yet he still gets brought up. Like, is that just because he had college production?
And that is like kind of the link that you're talking about. He was actually the last. He's the last wide receiver that made my cut. I even said it. Needs more bulk. Needs his. He uses his length, but the length without bulk, without power, without the ability to separate the NFL means squat. You could be 7 feet tall in the NFL, and if you don't know how to play the position, it's not going to matter. That was like all the jokes back in the day, like put Yao Ming on an NFL team and just throw it up to him. You know what? Defenders know how to defend, like even if they can't get to the ball.
Yeah, I always thought the better comparison would be just put LeBron in somewhere at tight end. We know the athleticism is through the roof. The hand-eye is excellent. I feel like an athlete like that could pick up the rest, even if it was just like a red zone package.
Yeah, I think you can see Coxey getting a flyer because he is somebody who's a good route runner. So it kind of offsets a little bit. Like, all right, let's get him in the weight room. Let's get him on some meal plans. Take him to freaking, I don't know, a diner every single night. Take him to Shoney's every single week and put some bulk on this kid.
Well, is that is that one of the downsides of going to a place like Memphis versus going to Ohio State, where they would be doing this at Ohio State? And I don't know whether they do or don't at Memphis, but I know that they do at Ohio State. Like, give you the nutrition program, give you that sort of thing, where facilities and budget just might be more limited at Memphis.
They will be, but hopefully, I would assume. I mean, people need to be fired if they're not trying to do it no matter what. I mean, the facilities at Memphis are still pretty damn nice compared to, like, it's not. Heck, it's better than ODU, and ODU isn't bad. I've seen ODU. ODU would make a lot of people be like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty nice place to work out. So if the coach isn't on top of them, and that's where, we say put on more bulk, and that's easy to say, and I'm kind of glad you brought this up because it's, I've said it a couple times. It's easy to say these things. It's easy to say, he just needs to do this. He just needs to do that. It might be easy to say, hey, he just needs to put on bulk. But look at, Sean Bradley, the basketball player. Just put on bulk. And some guys, look at me. I've been working out consistently for years. I just have bad genes. I can never get ripped. Some guys might just not be able to put on the weight because their body just doesn't do it.
I mean, that's fair too. And you'd probably know with Coxey at this point because he's, he'll be 24,
right,
I think, by the time the season starts.
And that's another concern.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else you think we should talk about that didn't get brought up?
Nah, we didn't really. You don't need to concern yourself too. I mean, if you want to go check out my article, I have a lot of other names thrown on this.
Tell people where they can go check it out.
At The Athletic. That's what it is, the top 85 players for fantasy football purposes only. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. That's all I concern myself with because we're fantasy. That's what we want. So yeah, check it out of The Athletic. There's offers up all the time. I tweeted out an all-in kid. Oh, and the Ted Lasso announcement. That's why I wore this t-shirt today. I'm so pumped for that. I'm taking off. What was it? July 23rd or something like that?
Just take the whole day off and just watch some Ted Lasso?
Yeah. Just to binge the hell out of Ted Lasso, yeah.
There you go. A lot going on. I wish I could do that. That sounds great, Jake. I gotta move. It's not fantastic stuff.
I've been looking for a house for like 2 months, and apparently it's still bananas right now. Come with extra $50,000 over the asking price, waive inspections, and put $20,000 in cash down. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not getting that house.
Well, you better win a big DraftKings contest, and then you'll be set.
Oh, I like the transition. That was good.
And there we go. Brought to you by DraftKings is the Pat Mayo Experience. You can follow Jake on Twitter at AllInKid. You can check out all of the NFL draft coverage up on Mayo Media Network and on the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Smash the like button to this video and subscribe to the network itself. The Emery Hunt Show about running backs already out. Or if you're listening to the audio version of this, it's part 1 of this podcast. Also, we'll have the mock draft, all the props, and everything like that coming for you within the next week. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!